When it comes to filing taxes online, the status quo is unacceptable.
The United States is really an outlier among wealthy countries in how we do tax prep.
It's absurd that American taxpayers have to pay to fulfill a civic obligation.
In 1 year alone, they estimated 14 million Americans had paid for tax prep software that they should have been able to get for free, generating at least $1 billion in a single year of revenue for the tax prep companies like Intuit.
And that's because the tax prep companies sabotaged the program so they could keep raking in money.
Every year, the United States government requires taxpayers to file our taxes. Americans spend a total of 1.7 billion hours and $31 billion each year just to comply with the law, largely using private tax preparers like TurboTax and H&R Block. But what if all of that could be different? What if it could be easier? What if it could be free?
Across the world, there are a few different ways that taxes can be filed. The three sort of main ways are direct file, pre-populated returns, and return-free filing. Direct file, which is in question with the IRS today, is a form of filing in which you have a form with questions and you basically just answer the questions to be able to file your taxes. Pre-populated returns are a little bit easier for the taxpayer because portions of that form are already pre-filled for them. Return-free filing, which 30 countries around the world and many of our peer countries already have, is a type of filing in which the public tax agency does all of the work for you without the constituent doing much more than just approving or fixing maybe any errors that come through at the very end. Oddly enough, in the US context, none of these three are currently at play when you file your federal tax returns.
But the Inflation Reduction Act, which President Biden signed into law in 2022, could change that.
In the IRA, $15 million was given to test something called the direct file system. The direct file system in question here is similar to any of the other sorts of tax forms that constituents might be filling out already. The main difference, however, is that this direct file system would be administered directly by the IRS, and it would be free.
As it stands, there are only a few options and many obstacles for those looking to file their taxes without paying private tax preparers, and that's by design.
In the early years of the George W. Bush administration, there was a move to create some kind of free electronic filing system.
Justin Elliott is a reporter with ProPublica. He's spent years tracking the tax prep industry and their attempts to block government-run tax prep software.
If the government made it free and easy for people to file their taxes, directly with the government, then Intuit stood to lose a lot of money. So the tax prep industry mounted a huge lobbying effort to essentially stop that from happening.
What they came up with was the Free File Alliance, a group of private tax prep companies that, in theory, would offer free tax prep software and services for certain Americans, under the condition that the IRS not enter the tax prep marketplace.
Essentially, the story of the next 2 decades was the tax prep industry finding ways to give as few free versions of its software as possible. At various points in this program, something like 70% of all Americans were eligible, in theory, to get tax prep software for free. But as of 2018, only 2% of people filing their taxes electronically actually use this program.
Justin has reported on all types of tricks and traps the private tax prep industry has used to scam eligible free filers, like quote-unquote free filing services that actually forced you to pay.
At one point, we found that the forms that would cause you to hit the paywall included things like a tax form related to unemployment income, a tax form related to student loan interest, things that by their very nature, the people filing them would tend to be low income or would be in, sometimes vulnerable populations. We found at one point that Intuit had actually added HTML code to the website landing page for the truly free edition, that even if you were looking for it and went to Google and put in TurboTax free file edition, this page would simply not show up on search engines. We talked to a lot of people that worked at Intuit over the years, got all kinds of internal documents that showed that this was all intentional. We got our hands on the internal instructions that were distributed to H&R Block customer service reps What it said was, do not send clients to this website unless they are specifically calling about the free file program. We want to send users to our paid products before the free product, if at all possible.
In 2022, Intuit agreed to pay $141 million to consumers who were, quote, unfairly charged.
To be clear, that was a small fraction, really, of how much these companies made in revenue from all this over the years. In 1 year alone, they estimated 14 million Americans had paid for tax prep software that they should have been able to get for free, generating at least $1 billion in a single year of revenue for the tax prep companies like Intuit. These companies are willing to spend what looks like a lot of money, like millions of dollars on lobbying, and the amount of money they're spending on lobbying is a tiny, minuscule fraction of the annual revenue they make from tax prep software.
The tax prep companies collectively have spent more than $45.7 million through the first quarter of this year, and that's going back to 1998. And so they're spending on lobbying and ultimately being able to insulate that industry that has become so lucrative to them. My name is Anna Masolia. I'm an editorial and investigations manager at Open Secrets, tracking dark money groups, looking at lobbying, and in this context, looking into the tax prep industry's efforts to really push against free tax filing. Intuit, which owns Turbotax, for those of you who don't know, spent a record sum last year on lobbying the federal government. This was over $3.5 million, which is more than they've ever spent before in a single year. We're seeing tax prep companies pouring millions and millions of dollars into lobbying the federal government on a variety of issues, but a big part of that, based on their Lobbying Disclosure Act filings, has been pushing against free tax filing. This means that they're pushing to make tax filing more complicated for the average American. And with each year, they're pouring more and more money into these efforts.
As the tax prep industry continues to spend on lobbying, the IRS is moving ahead with the implementation of a scaled direct file pilot in the 2024 filing season.
There are three sort of key benefits with a direct file system. The first, as I mentioned before, is that it would be free. Second, it would afford Americans a lot more data privacy. By cutting out a third-party preparer, what you're effectively doing is sharing your private information with one less entity. The third big benefit of a direct file system is greater ease for issuing credits or refunds, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Child Tax Credit, which serves a lot of low and middle income American families. If you're filing directly with the IRS, it allows you to expedite, hopefully in the future, the process and the timeliness of those credits by filing directly through a direct file system. It is going to be a first step towards a future state or system in which we aren't paying money to pay more money to the government.
Thank you so much for watching our video. If you'd like to see more stories like this one, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to get more Perfect Union in your feed. And if you have any ideas for stories that you would like for us to investigate, just drop them in the comments below.